Considering that the video was created to review the next generation version, the game itself has been avoided thoroughly reviewed and has been evaluated only in general, the strengths and weaknesses of the game.
Although the story of the game The Witcher 3, Wild Hunt has somehow an apocalyptic theme, and Wild Hunt is looking for her because of Ciri's powerful blood, the amazing thing about the story and narrative of the game is its personality. We are not going to be in the role of a hero who is supposed to prevent the coming of the apocalypse, or White Frost, but in the first place, we are a caring father who seeks to find his lost daughter and, in this direction, refuses to take any action. Perhaps the most intriguing feature of Geralt's character in the third version is the same. We are in the role of Geralt, a monster killer, a father, a witcher, a thief, a murderer and a savior. Depending on the circumstances and moments, Geralt reveals a different part of his personality. Perhaps the one that made Geralt immeasurably popular is his personification flexibility. He is not a superficial protagonist who merely tinsel monsters and humans and heroically prevents the apocalypse and stands one man in front of Wild Hunt. He has his weaknesses and shortcomings, and throughout the story we also see that Geralt needs the help of his friends to achieve his goals. One of the characteristics that makes the protagonist of a story, regardless of the medium in which the story is narrated, becomes more believable is showing human characteristics. Fear, weakness, hope, helplessness, despair, courage. These are the things we see in Geralt. In general, the most fascinating feature of most great personalities is that they do not create a perfect, godlike personality. A character who neither needs the help of others nor becomes helpless. But Geralt is completely against it. In all moments of the game's storyline, whether in the main storyline or in the DLCs, Geralt has been dealt with in an incredibly believable way. Remember Unseen Elder? After the initial encounter, Geralt was well aware of the danger and knew the slightest stupidity would mean the end of his life. Even fear was evident in Geralt's dialogues. Or when he found Ciri lifeless, his behavior had become very believable. We love Geralt and communicate with him not because he is a powerful brave or an unmatched hero, but because he is human. The super-paying characters in the game The Witcher 3, Wild Hunt, are not summed up to Geralt and other important ancillary characters such as Yennefer and Triss. One of the game's most amazing features is that even the minor characters have a deep payout. From the simple farmer that seeks to save her daughter, to the witcher that massacred a village altogether. We are not merely faced with a series of quest giver that will give us activities and pay us for it. We are dealing with people who have different small and big problems and have different emotions. Perhaps this is the reason why the sub-stages of the game are largely addictive. Like most other open-world works, we are not going from A to B, killing a few enemies or obtaining a particular item and receiving coins for it. We deal with stories and events that are sometimes twisted, deep and attractive than the main storyline of many other works. In addition to the extraordinary payout of the game's characters, another fascinating point we are witnessing is the naturalness and depth of relationships and interactions between the characters. From Geralt's emotional relationships, to the master-discipleship relationship between him and Vesemir, to his strange and different friendship with Dandelion, the interactions and relationships the game offers to the audience are incredibly believable and profound. Even if you haven't experienced previous versions and it's the first time you'll get to know the world of The Witcher. You quickly get acclimatized to this world and its personalities and understand their relationships and interactions. Another big strength of the game is its unparalleled variety and extraordinary depth of its various ancillary stages. I talked about the narrative and the extraordinary payment of characters and events in the minor stages, but it's not bad to mention the variety of these stages in terms of gameplay as well. The variety of enemies and creatures and monsters is an admirable game. But the more admirable point is the clever use of this variety and breadth of enemies and monsters in the minor stages in Witcher contracts. Almost no two of the same stages will be found in The Witcher 3, and each of them, from story to objective and general, and the enemies you will encounter, are very different from each other. Of course, on the other hand, we also see a series of small weaknesses that I have to point out. The first is the weakness in paying the game's main antagonist. As the game's greatest antagonist, in the original story, Eredin cannot step on the feet of other main and ancillary characters of the insider story. In fact, he is, in some ways, a classic villain. He who is 100% negative and evil and there is no foreground for his wickedness. Unlike modern antagonists who have their own way of thinking and ideology and somehow their actions are justified based on their goals, Eredin's character is merely a villain with evil goals. The few interactions and sequences of his confrontation with Witcher and his allies are also devoid of any fictional elegance and deepening of his character. Of course, it should be noted that the weakness of the main antagonist characterization was greatly resolved in the game's DLCs, and both the main antagonists of the adjunct packages, along with the new characters introduced in these two new adventures, were terrific in terms of credibility, depth and payment. In particular, Gonter Odim, who is considered one of the most different and fascinating antagonists in the history of video games, displays a different manifestation of a demon. Another big weakness of the game from my point of view, which happened to be largely lost under the shadow of the game's numerous strengths, is the weakness in the role-playing elements in the concept of surfing and exploring. Let me explain it this way. The game world is full of undetectable areas or points of interest that are visible in the form of question marks on the map. These areas have a high variety: caves, monsters' nests, bandits' camp, protected treasures and many more. But the problem is that the game doesn't work successfully in the field of rewards. That is, after the toughest battles with powerful enemies and monsters, after looting boxes and corpses, your reward and Geralt's, a few useless swords and a number of random items that are at best half useful. It's true that weapon schematics is a valuable loot, but in general, it's neither of the incredibly powerful and varied swords, nor of the varied armor to build different builds. I even remember at the end of the Heart of Stone extension package, the sword I received at the end of the game was incredibly weaker than my own. Notice how disappointing the prize and final reward of the extension package appeared in this instance. Unfortunately, there is no word from the scaling system for weapons and items, and valuable weapons are also usually quickly underleveled. If we compare the variety, value and abundance of weapons, armor and lotting items in the game world with other major role-playing titles such as Skyrim, the game's weaknesses become more apparent in this area. Of course, as I said, The Witcher 3 has done so much in the field of characterization, storytelling, ancillary stages and extraordinary persistence that this big, profound flaw is less felt and eye-catching. But from a logical and comparative perspective, playing in the context of a reward system for activities and missions, the variety of weapons and armor is not possible to build performance so high. Of course, it was partly possible to build thanks to Witcher gear in the extension package, but the main problem with the game remains. Personally, I hope that in the next version, the creators will care more about exploring and rewarding. Perhaps the biggest milestone of the 9th generation update to The Witcher 3, Wild Hunt, is the amount of new access and personalization options available to audiences. For example, personally, in the original version, I was not so satisfied with the game camera because I like a camera close to the character and somehow more cinematic. Fortunately, in this update, it is possible to change the distance of the game camera so that those who are interested in a more cinematic and modern experience can enjoy it. The experience of playing with a camera close to Geralt, especially during the fights, was very appealing to me and has completely transformed the mood of the battles of the game. Of course, I have to admit that the camera close to the character and the back of the shoulder, in crowded sequences and when fighting multiple enemies, is a bit of a problem that can't be faulted because the nature of the low FOV and the close camera is the same thing. On the other hand, when riding horses, it is also possible for the camera to be closer to Geralt and Roach and create a more cinematic experience. The great thing about new changes and features is that they are all optional and there is no compulsion to use or not use them. This enables different audiences, with different tastes, to enjoy the game and not be compelled to experience a particular option. More modern options in the gameplay section have also been added to the game. For example, you can quickly use the Geralt's 5 Cygnus without constantly using the sign change menu, which helps the game's struggles not get out of rhythm. Of course, getting a little used to this new system may be hard, and probably many prefer the same classic way of choosing and using sign. But all in all, this new possibility can help maintain the rhythm and speed of the struggles, and there is no need to make a short pause when changing sign. Let's go for visual and graphical game changes. At first glance, the most common part of which changes are felt is vegetation and the overall quality of textures. Literally, the creators have drawn a hand over the game environment and are faced with more dynamic, colorful and eye-catching environments, objects in a more dynamic world. This can be seen even when experiencing performance mode. On the other hand, the design of faces has not seen such a change and only a little detail of its faces and textures has progressed. The biggest changes in appearance and visuals of the game are felt when you experience the game in quality mode. Of course, personally, always and in all titles, I prefer performance mode and 60 frames to better graphics, beam tracking and texture details, but I was rather surprised at the short time I experienced the game in quality mode. The game has largely updated itself outwardly and visually to the extent that it gets hard to consider the game released more than 7 years ago. Of course, to be honest, the game frames in quality mode are a bit catastrophic and I don't think anyone can handle this graphic mode. Also note that the quality of the textures, light reflection and detail of the environments of the game should not be compared to the big titles of the last few years, because in any case, it has been years since the game. The technical performance of the game is fairly acceptable. If you have experienced the original version, you are familiar with bugs and technical problems. Personally, I didn't see a bug or a particular technical problem, but unfortunately the game frames on performance mode in crowded scenes take on a sinusoidal state. Of course, in general, 90% of the time the experience is smooth, but be ready to face some sine and variable HIGHER.T frames, depending on the environment or sequence. The 9th generation update of The Witcher 3. Wild Hunt is a magnificent on final Geralt adventures. The Witcher 3 has never been a perfect work, but it doesn't matter. If you're going to experience this title once again, probably for the last time, now is the best opportunity for that. An unparalleled adventure that brings to life the pinnacle of the art of video games.